For this week's America 250 feature, we take a look at a Vietnam veteran who was a rifleman and has spent a lot of time honoring America's history by being in the Sons of the American Revolution. Our Peyton Brooker takes a look at Gene Yost's story in Marietta.
We the People, proudly sponsored by WVU Medicine Camden Clark Medical Center.
Gene Yost is a U.S. Marine Corps veteran who served 2 years during the middle of the Vietnam War. Yost says his decision to enlist came from a sense of duty and from watching family members serve in the military.
I grew up in an era when communism was probably the worst. I remember when I was about 11 or 12 and we trained on rescue at the fire department. We had the Cuban Missile Crisis. Now we went in through growing up, I see all of my family photos of servicemen that were in World War II in Korea.
Yost says most of his time overseas was spent in and around Da Nang, including Hill 55 outside the city. And he also served in the Philippines during the war. He says he had a close call when he contracted malaria in Vietnam and spent time in a military hospital. Yost says life in a war zone was stressful, but he considers himself lucky compared to others who had faced daily attacks.
It was stressful, but when I looked at what service I had compared to some that were at some areas that were being attacked, like Khe Sanh, and they were receiving bombardment every day, my life was easy in comparison to what some went through.
Yost says the service gave him a broader perspective and a deeper respect for the people who served.
I don't know that it changed you. You get a better understanding. You serve with people that some are from an Indian reservation, some are from the deep heart of New York City, or the Beach Boys from California. So you had an experience, and each of the guys were people you looked out for.
Today, Yost serves as the vice president of the Sons of the American Revolution chapter in Marietta and also helps with scouting in Barlow. With America 250 approaching, Yost says it's important for families to remember the pioneers and patriots who helped shape this country.
If we've got 60,000 people in this county, 40,000 of them have patriots that served in the American Revolution. And in this county, a great number of them served alongside of George Washington. They were at Bunker Hill. They were at the crossing of the Delaware. They were at these major sites.
Yost says the best place to start is at home by listening to the stories of older generations.
Talk to your grandparents. Talk to your great-grandparents. Look at their experiences. Talking with them, you'll know more and be able to pass it on to your kids.
This is Peyton Brooker in Marietta, WTAP News. This is home.